Welcome to Statistics for Surveys, Session 1 Basics, Segment 6 Summary. The objective of this segment is to give an overview of all the terms that were actually discussed in the last few segments. Two new terms will actually also be added: dichotomous and scale. In the first segment of this session, we discussed two types of statistics: descriptive statistics, which tries to convert large collections of data into either tables, diagrams, and/or statistical measures, or inferential statistics, which somehow tries to say something about a population based on a sample. In the second segment, we discussed quite a lot of terms that related to data in general. We used an example survey and converted that into a so-called codebook. The codebook shows which variables, things that can vary, were used and how they were coded, their specific values. Their values are the possible variations of a variable, and the coding is then assigning a number or a letter to those. So for example, 0 is the code for male at the variable gender. For each case, in this case a case is a person, then the scores are the individual values for an individual case on an individual variable. So my score on gender would be 0 because I'm a male. In segments 3 till 5, we discussed the 4 different types of measurement levels: nominal, ordinal, interval, and scale. To choose which measurement level you actually have at a variable, you can use the following flow diagram. The first thing to ask is if there's a logical ordering in the values, besides alphabetical. If the answer is no, then you have a nominal variable. If the answer is yes, you need to check those values and ask yourself if the difference between two consecutive values is always the same or will always be perceived the same. If the answer is no, then you have an ordinal variable. If the answer is yes, we need another question, which is how was the 0 point chosen on your scale? Is it a natural 0 or an arbitrary one? If it's an arbitrary one, so the 0 does not imply the absence of something, then you have an interval scale. In all other cases, you therefore have a ratio scale. Depending on the measurement level, you can perform different things. So for example, at the nominal level, we can only compare counts of values. At ordinal, we can also look at less than or more than statements. With interval, adding and subtracting also becomes an option. And with ratio, we can also multiply and divide. This therefore also means that sometimes people say that ratio is the highest measurement level and nominal the lowest. If you want, you can remember perhaps the French word noir, which are the initials of each, to remember this order. Noir meaning black in French. Although not mentioned in the original article by Stevens, there are two special types of measurement level that we will actually encounter. The first one is dichotomous, which is any variable that only has two possible options. So for example, with gender we have male or female. That can also be considered dichotomous. True or false, on or off, right or wrong, pass or fail. Notice that pass-fail might be considered even ordinal. So also sometimes if an ordinal variable only has two options, we could also classify it as dichotomous. The last term is scale. Scale is a term used by SPSS and is actually just a collection of either interval or ratio variable. So if you have a ratio variable, SPSS would consider this a scale variable. Because there's not so often a big difference between what you can and cannot do with interval or ratio variables, so many tests are actually designed for interval and therefore also applicable to ratio, the scale term is also the term I'll be using quite frequently. in below the many terms that we discussed in session 1. These terms relate to statistics in general and will come back every now and again in different sessions as well.